The living experiment, when attention, meaning, and world converge. We call it a science of synchronicity, the disciplined, poetically rigorous, and intellectually honest inquiry into why certain outer events seem to touch inner needs with surprising precision. We are not proclaiming miracles. We are proposing a living experiment where metaphysics, questions about being, meaning, and purpose, meets quantum mechanics as a language of limits and possibilities. Quantum reminds us that questions shape what can be measured. Metaphysics asks what, after all, counts as meaning. Between them emerges an everyday method, attention that selects, intention that orients, and a minimal action that tests whether what we feel yields practicable reality without violating facts, values, or people. Before we go further, a brief invitation within the first minute. If this content resonates, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Beyond helping the algorithm, that gesture crystallizes intention and creates resonance. In a metaphysical image, your presence marks the field, signaling that this theme matters and increasing the probability that similar messages reach those who need them. As in an experiment, multiple coherent measurements reduce noise and strengthen signal. Your click and subscription act as a small constructive interference, phase adding to phase, amplitude rising, allowing this work to overflow toward other lives. No magical promises, only responsibility and care. But the word synchronicity was coined to name meaningful coincidences not explained by a direct causal chain, yet capable of reorganizing the course of experience. Metaphysically, we treat it as a fit of meaning, an alignment between an intimate question and an event that illuminates it. To stay scientifically responsible, we separate metaphor from literal claim. We do not invoke particles to justify decisions, but we use quantum theory to remember that conditions of observation matter. When you clarify intention, you alter the slice of the real you can perceive and, by consequence, the avenues of action that become graspable. Coincidence then stops being mere sparkle and turns into a hypothesis to be tested on the ground of the day. Physics of the micro teaches that to measure is to choose how to ask. Different arrangements reveal complementary aspects of the same system. Carried over soberly, this invites an existential complementarity. There are moments when numbers and deadlines are the right question. In others, the way forward opens by reading symbols, listening to the body, and weighing values. The observer here is not a mind that conjures objects by wanting them, but a posture that configures possibilities by defining focus, intervals, and decision criteria. Fatalistic questions harvest proof of fatalism. Honest questions make room for small, responsible steps, where life answers with coherence that can be verified. Let us begin by calibrating the observer. Before any reading of signs, adjust the inner conditions of the experiment. A longer exhale, the jaw unclenching, feet meeting the ground, language that names the dominant emotion without judgment. Then write your intention in one line, in the present tense with an action verb. You are not summoning hidden forces, you are reducing attentional entropy, organizing the perceptual field so that useful signals stand out without being hunted. Your journal will be the detector. There, the subtle gains contour, and you can measure effects in 24 to 72 hours. learning to separate gold from glitter with both tenderness and rigor. And if something in you has already grown quiet, receive that quiet as potency, not apathy. What we practice here is an ethics of reading, using metaphysics to ask for meaning and quantum to remember the limits of what we can claim, while everyday life provides the laboratory. In the next block, we will deepen the metaphysical groundwork of intention, what it means to choose with your whole being, and then move into the mechanics of choosing, where ideas like information, complementarity, and decoherence serve as responsible metaphors for your decision process. May this experiment stay light, deep, and practicable, one measured centimeter at a time. Metaphysical foundations of intention, will, meaning, and the ethics of desire. Intention on the metaphysical plane is not a petition to the universe, nor a wish wrapped in a mantra. It is the act of aligning your whole being with a meaning you recognize as true now. Where desire tends to aim at objects and results, intention asks for direction and quality of presence. It is born at the meeting point of values, real need, and concrete possibility, which is why it demands discernment rather than enchantment. When an intention is mature, mind, feeling, and body begin to say the same thing. In that coherence, reality becomes more legible because attention stops hunting for miracles and starts hosting meaning. Distinguishing will from compulsive desire is a hygiene of the spirit. Desire wants to fix lack by force, tends toward noise, and demands urgency. Will is patient, accepts limits, and respects the tempo of a process. Ask yourself frankly, what world is my intention trying to bring into existence? In whose name and for what am I walking? Intention is everyday teleology, a discrete arrow pointing to the kind of human you decide to be in each scene. It defines what counts as gain or loss, what is sufficient or excess, and restores dignity to choice because it links today's gesture to the biography you agreed to write. Every serious intention carries a quiet pact. To choose is also to renounce. By saying yes to a path, you acknowledge necessary no's, accept trade-offs, and refuse shortcuts that violate your values. This renunciation is not punishment. It is the price of form. As with a sculptor's craft, removing material reveals the figure. Intentions that promise everything, fast and cost-free, are usually fantasy or inner advertising. Intentions that recognize costs and limits produce care because they bring you closer to reality as it is. And in that honest meeting, synchronicities stop being spectacle and become workable guidance. Quantum mechanics offers a useful image here, metaphor, not literalism. Measuring a system is choosing an arrangement. Different setups reveal complementary aspects. Likewise, your intention functions as an observation basis. It decides which question you will pose to the world, and with it, which information becomes relevant. That does not guarantee outcomes, but it does reduce attentional entropy and organizes the field of perceived possibilities. With clear intention, certain patterns emerge as signal, while others dissolve as noise. Reality does not bend to whims. It becomes more coherent for those who know what they are seeking without forcing the map onto the territory. In practice, writing a good intention is an exercise in precision and ethics. One line is enough. Present tense, action verb. I conduct the conversation with respect and clarity. I deliver the study with focus and honesty. Then run the triple test. Is it concrete? Can I begin today? Is it ethical? Does it honor my values and the other? Is it situated? Does it account for the limits of time, energy, and context? Check the body. Does the sentence create calm expansion or anxious euphoria? Adjust the language until the intention fits in your chest without squeezing. Only then aim the flashlight of attention and let the environment answer with its discrete clues. A proposal for the next 24 hours. Upon waking, write a single intention and place it in your pocket or on your phone screen. Throughout the day, notice 3 moments when it shifted your perception or behavior. In your journal, record the scene, the bodily sensation, and the minimal step that followed. At night, ask whether the intention produced practical coherence, less friction, more clarity, 1 centimeter forward. If yes, deepen the groove. If not, refine the sentence and note where desire grabbed the wheel. In the next block, we enter alignment. How body language and emotion sustain or sabotage the intention you chose. Alignment. Body, language, and emotion sustaining intention. Alignment is the art of having body, language, and emotion tell the same story as your intention. Without that meeting, intention remains a pretty line in a notebook. With it, reality gains legibility. Think of alignment as the fine-tuning of an instrument before the concert. The melody can exist without perfect pitch, but it sounds harsh and wastes too much energy. There is no mysticism here, only hygiene of presence. Adjusting the inner state does not guarantee results. It simply prepares the ground so useful signals stand out and your choices gain practical grip without violence against you or the context around you. The body is the first laboratory of this adjustment. Short breaths and lifted shoulders often produce a threat reading. Longer exhales and weight in the feet return breadth to the perceptual field. Try feeling gravity as an old friend that anchors you, and notice how the gaze softens when the jaw lets go. In a responsible quantum metaphor, this state resembles phase coherence. Less thermal noise, more capacity to perceive fine patterns. Not because the body creates particles, but because a regulated system distinguishes signal from distraction more cleanly. A tuned body does not promise miracles. It saves psychic entropy and returns precision to the gesture. Language is the measuring apparatus of your world. Sentences are lenses. I have to contracts. I choose to restores agency. When you frame the question with beauty and precision, what is the next honest step? You change the observational setup of daily life, and things once invisible gain salience. Naming the emotion is also organizing language. I feel apprehension is different from everything is wrong. As you refine words, you reduce semantic entropy and align imagination with the possible. This is not performative positivity, but exactness. Saying what is with care, so that the real can answer with what might be, without self-deception. Emotions, in turn, are information, not enemies. Contraction alerts you to limits. Expansion signals opportunity. Both ask for handling, not censorship. To align is to let emotion pass through without hijacking the controls. A quiet practice helps. Recognize, breathe, integrate. I recognize what I feel without extra storytelling. I breathe until the body finds its axis again. I integrate by asking what this feeling calls me to do, ethically and in a small way. If emotion is a storm, let the tide fall before reading signs. As with decoherence, confused states collapse into habits quickly and automatically. Presence returns choice to the process. A 5-minute alignment protocol. No lists, just cadence. 1 minute to lengthen the exhale and feel the weight in your heels. 1 minute to sweep the body from feet to head, releasing small tensions where they hide. 1 minute to gently name the dominant emotion and let it exist. 1 minute to rewrite the intention in a single precise line, in the present tense. 1 minute to listen to the environment as one waits for a chord to resolve, and let the next reversible micro-action for the coming 24 hours emerge. Note the before and after in your journal. Watch whether the sense of sharpness increases and your speech grows simpler. A 72-hour coherence test. Every time you notice a sign, pause and check whether body, language, and emotion sustain the same direction. If any one of them says no, postpone the reading and realign. If all of them say yes calmly, move 1 centimeter and observe the effects. Mark in your journal where alignment saved energy and where haste generated noise. In this way, intention stops being a promise and becomes a posture. In the next block, we enter the mechanics of choosing, information, complementarity, and decoherence as responsible metaphors for turning the reading of synchronicities into decisions that respect limits and expand freedom. Mechanics of choice, information, complementarity, and decoherence. And to speak of the mechanics of choosing is to admit that deciding is not merely wanting, it is measuring. Information here is the honest reduction of uncertainty we feel before a path. When you write the intention and observe the environment with sobriety, you produce bits of clarity that were previously noise. We are not claiming that thoughts mold particles. We are saying that well-formed questions reorganize perception and behavior, and that alone can alter your trajectory. The journal serves as the measuring device. It logs context, sensation, and unfolding, allowing the pretty coincidence to separate, over time, from the reproducible signal that generates coherent action. Complementarity in quantum theory reminds us that different observational setups reveal legitimate and sometimes mutually exclusive aspects of the same phenomenon. Translated into life, it invites us to alternate reading bases without dogma, spreadsheet eyes when numbers and deadlines demand precision, symbolic eyes when metaphors and affects point to meanings the spreadsheet cannot reach. Neither view is total. Each illuminates a slice. Mature deciding is the choreography of these ways of seeing. First verify facts, then listen to the body, and finally translate everything into a small, responsible step that can be observed within the next hours, not postponed into distant promises. Decoherence at the microscale explains why superpositions unravel in noisy environments, returning a world that looks classical and stable. As an existential image, it warns. When the mind scatters and the body tenses, multiple possibilities collapse into automatic habits. If nothing is instituted, brief silence, precise question, ethical check, the day decides for you. Creating conditions for decision means lowering the ambient noise of haste. Exhale longer than you inhale. Name the emotion. Narrow the intention to a single line. Only then open your listening. What was fog gains contour. What was impulse becomes criterion. Information has a cost. Erasing, measuring, comparing. All of it consumes attentional energy and emotional time. Science marks physical limits to processing. Life marks limits of soul. Therefore, the architecture of your decision must be energetically frugal. Seek the datum that truly changes the step, not a museum of evidence to feed anxiety. The entropy metaphor helps reduce confusion without hardening the mind. Practically trade infinite proofs for a minimum viable experiment, a clear conversation, a simple prototype, a small market or relationship test. The goal is to gather reality data that confirm or refine your reading without exhausting the system. Turn this mechanics into practice with a small 20-minute lab. Choose a live decision and write 2 framings of the question. One tightened by fear, another opened by responsible curiosity. Notice how each frame selects different signals in the same environment. Then collect one single piece of missing objective information and one honest bodily impression. Convert the synthesis into a reversible micro-action for the next 24 to 72 hours. In your journal, register what shifted in the inner climate and in the outer facts. Repeating this protocol builds a track record more valuable than any motivational slogan. In the end, the mechanics of choice returns humility and power at once. Power to organize your field with clean questions. Humility to accept that the world also decides. Where you find coherence, advance a centimeter. Where you find noise, refine the setup. Synchronicity then stops being spectacle and becomes an intimate engineering of meaning. In the next block, we bring this engineering into life in relation, exploring a responsible use of the entanglement image, interdependence, social resonance, and the ethics of impact, how small choices, taken with presence, propagate clarity through networks you cannot yet see. Responsible entanglement, interdependence, social resonance, and the ethics of impact. In the lab, entanglement is a correlation of microstates that defies classical expectations without allowing communication faster than light. In our journey, we use it as a responsible metaphor to remember that nothing exists in isolation. Every decision vibrates through networks of relationship, history, and context. Synchronicities, then, can be read as emergences of coherence in these networks, when your intention aligns with human and material fields already carrying predispositions. We are not asserting everyday telepathy. We are asserting interdependence. Local choices modulate global probabilities, not by magic, but through resignification, trust, and new routes of action that become viable. Metaphysically, this echoes the insight that being is always being with. You are not a solitary point. You are a node in a web of meanings, memories, habits, languages, affective contracts, culture. When you tune body, language, and intention, your presence shifts relational phases, subtle offsets in rhythm, expectation, and availability, and sometimes yields constructive interference, convergence of efforts, sudden clarity, timely encounters. It is as if previously scattered subsystems gained enough synchronization for discrete patterns to reveal themselves. In this framing, synchronicity stops being spectacle and becomes a sign of meaningful coupling between you and the milieu you inhabit. Call this social resonance. Human environments respond to the quality of presence the way rooms respond to frequencies. In a tense meeting, a regulated body and precise speech can lower intersubjective entropy. Roles reorganize, listening appears, forgotten options return to the table. Nothing mystical happened. The field of incentives and safety changed. People perceive less risk in telling the truth, dialogue gains signal, and the group accesses trajectories that once felt unavailable. Rather than hunting for omens, you learn to induce conditions under which reality answers legibly, beginning with yourself, not by controlling the other. Hence the ethics. Do not instrumentalize signs to manipulate people. If literal entanglement does not permit instant messaging, it also does not license relational shortcuts. The rule is simple and demanding: clarity, consent, and care. Use synchronicities in service of the real. Say what is necessary with respect. Accept limits. Make honest requests. Refuse games that add noise. The criterion is practicable coherence. Does your reading yield a small, reversible, responsible step? Does it produce measurable common good? If not, thank the symbol and return to alignment. Ethics here is not ornament. It is the mechanism that keeps enchantment from sliding into delusion. A field experiment. Sketch in your notebook a relationship map tied to your live question. Mark 3 nodes, 1 promising partnership, 1 tense bond, 1 neutral space, and for each, craft a micro-intervention that lowers noise and increases legibility, a clear request, an admission of error, an offer of help, a boundary stated with kindness. Execute 1 intervention at a time and watch, for 72 hours, shifts in climate, availability, and perceived options. Log signal, meaning step, and notice whether constructive interference appears. Those discrete alignments that force nothing and yet unstick a stubborn door. If you notice a fertile pattern, strengthen it. If nothing happens, learn from the informative silence and refine the setup. Perhaps the question is poorly framed. Perhaps the body still asks for regulation. Perhaps the action needs to be smaller. Entanglement, as metaphor, invites us to honor the web without romanticizing it. The world responds, but it also resists, and that resistance is valuable data. In the next block, we will consolidate this relational engineering into a protocol for communication and agreements, how to translate synchronicities into precise conversations, contracts of clarity, and gentle limits that sustain the intention alignment action triad in real life. Protocol for communication and agreements. Translating signals into clear conversation. If synchronicity is a clue and alignment is preparation, agreement is the concrete form where meaning lands. Conversation here works like a shared measurement. 2 observers define together the question they will pose to the world, and with that, reduce the noise that usually corrodes relationships. Metaphysically, it is the gesture of bringing the invisible into the visible. In quantum terms, it is choosing an arrangement that renders the system legible for both. Without agreements, we are hostage to stray signals. With well-made agreements, we create ethical predictability. Clear expectations, delimited responsibilities, realistic timelines. The result is not control over the other, but intersubjective coherence. a shared phase in which decisions can couple without violence. Before proposing any adjustment, practice the quiet triad observe, name, ask. Observe without blame. I noticed X in such context. Name the impact without dramatization. In me, it generated Y. And ask with useful beauty, how can we do Z in a way that serves both of us? This cadence reduces conversational entropy because it avoids diffuse accusations and establishes a field where information can be exchanged without preemptive defense. Think of it as constructive interference. When your precision meets the other's listening, waves add, and the pattern becomes clear. If the conversation heats up, return to the body. Exhale longer than you inhale. Re-establish your axis and begin again with concrete observation, never with labels. To turn a clue into commitment, use the structure signal meaning request conditions. Signal. Describe what occurred without metaphysical interpretation. I received 3 messages about the topic. Meaning, why this matters now. Our deadline is approaching and I want to preserve our quality. Request. Something specific, viable, and dated. Could we review the document together tomorrow, 10 to 10:30? Conditions. The limit, resource, or trade that makes the agreement workable. I'll prepare the agenda. You bring the draft. In this way, the symbol that inspired the conversation doesn't become an argument from authority. It becomes a testable hypothesis. Record the agreement in your journal. Time, scope, and a success criterion within 24 to 72 hours. Agreements are where multiple possibilities collapse into one path, like a relational decoherence image. We remove the superposition of diffuse intentions and choose a common frequency to work in. To keep freedom without losing firmness, design short checkpoints, 30 to 45 minutes, and review dates. If something stalls, reframe the question. Perhaps the observational basis is wrong. What does success mean for each of us? Or a concrete resource is missing. Resistances are not failure, they are data. Treat them as variables in the experiment, not personal affronts. Where there is friction, shrink the scale of action until coherence returns to the body and to the conversation. Linguistic hygiene sustains good agreements. Prefer the observable I to the accusatory you. I notice X, I need Y, I can offer Z. Trade always never for samples, dates, episodes, effects. Avoid mystifying the other with I felt bad energy. Translate into behaviors and impact. When the message arrives without an agenda, I spend an extra hour figuring it out. I propose we send 3 clear bullet points. This raises mutual information and lowers semantic noise. The quantum metaphor helps us remember, what is measured clearly becomes negotiable. What stays vague becomes a field for fantasy, defensiveness, and the drain of psychic energy. A 24 to 72-hour exercise. Choose a relationship tied to your live question and draft a signal meaning request conditions message in 5 lines or fewer. Send it, schedule a short checkpoint, and log in your journal the before and after climate, the degree of clarity 1 to 5, and the piece of reality you obtained. If there is progress, consolidate the agreement in writing. If noise appears, pause, align your body, refine the question, and reduce the action scale. Remember, the goal is not to win the conversation. It is to create a shared phase so that synchronicity translates into results that honor values, facts, and people. In the next block, we will apply this protocol to decision prototyping. How to test hypotheses in 72 hours with minimal risk and maximum learning. Decision prototyping, 72-hour experiments and low-risk learning. To prototype decisions is to turn synchronicity into a minimum viable experiment. Instead of leaping into irreversible change, we craft a small, ethical, observable version of the desired path that can generate reality data within 24 to 72 hours. Metaphysically, it is where meaning meets form. In the responsible quantum image, it is choosing a measurement setup that makes one aspect of the system visible without pretending to capture the whole. A prototype does not validate destinations. It validates next steps. It lowers psychic entropy, saves energy, and preserves dignity because it lets you err at a safe scale, with fast learning and gentle corrections before rigid habits collapse everything. But designing a good prototype begins with a clear hypothesis. If I execute X, I expect to perceive Y within Z hours. That sentence organizes your field of observation and sets coherence criteria, which inner signals, calm expansion, sharpness, less friction, and which outer facts, replies, deliveries, invitations, simple metrics, would indicate real progress. Next, delimit resources and limits: time, money, attention, the support required. The quantum metaphor reminds us that every measurement alters what is observed. Therefore, declare in writing how you will measure to avoid post hoc bias. The more precise the question, the more legible the pattern, and the less room for seductive delusions. In execution, the watchword is reversibility. If the question is career, don't change everything. Propose one informational interview, a 2-afternoon pilot, or a paid sample with a closed scope. If the question is relationship, don't rebuild the past. Hold a brief conversation with a specific request and a review date. If the question is health, don't adopt an absolute regime. Test a minimal habit for 3 days while logging body and mood. In every case, the prototype acts like controlled collapse. One slice of the superposition of possibilities becomes a track you can observe, so your journal can capture effects without committing the whole system. To harvest real learning, treat the prototype as an information detector. Before you begin, record the initial state in your journal: dominant emotion, breath quality, clarity level 1 to 5, and honest expectation. During the test window, note objective events and micro adjustments in the body. At the end, write a belief update paragraph. What became more probable? What lost strength? Where did synchronicity illuminate direction? And where was there only sparkle? This isn't heavy statistics. It's narrative integrity. Avoid confirmation bias by asking explicitly which pieces of evidence contradict your hypothesis and what they suggest for the next prototype. Review is not a tribunal, it's a studio. If the criteria were met with lightness, scale a centimeter. Extend time, deepen scope, invite one more person. If half worked and half didn't, pivot. Keep what generated coherence and redesign the rest with a better question. If nothing moved, close with gratitude, silence is data too, and choose another route. Protect yourself from sunk cost drift. Don't keep a prototype because you've already invested too much. Keep it if it still produces useful information and honors values. Ethics remains the compass. No outcome is worth violating what sustains your humanity or another's. A practical proposal for the next 72 hours. Choose a live decision and write your hypothesis in a single line with an observable success criterion. Realign the body for 5 minutes, articulate the intention, and define the measurement setup, what to observe, when, and how. Execute the prototype at the smallest size that still yields learning, and schedule a 20-minute checkpoint for review. Close the loop with signal meaning step, recording what shifts in perception and in the world. In the next block, we'll move to scaling with sobriety, criteria for advancing, pausing, or closing paths, integrating risk, interdependence, and your atlas of synchronicities without losing your footing. Scaling with sobriety, when to advance, pause or close paths. Scaling is not about making more noise. It is about amplifying coherence. After a 72-hour prototype, the question arises, is it worth lengthening the stride? The answer does not live in the heat of enthusiasm, but in your atlas of synchronicities, the patterns that repeat with clarity, the decisions that reduce friction, the conversations that open without pressure. To scale soberly is to read that record like an affectionate scientist. If the signal has been stable across different contexts, if the body's tone was calm expansion, and if there was measurable benefit for you and the surrounding field, then perhaps it is time to add 1 more centimeter. Not a blind leap, but a step proportional to the clarity you earned. When to advance? When the intention, alignment, action triad held steady over short cycles, when results reproduced without demanding heroics, when intersubjectivity validated the read, spoken aloud, the hypothesis gained contour, when energetic costs stayed frugal and impact stayed ethical. In the responsible quantum image, it resembles constructive interference. Waves from different fronts add phase to phase, raising amplitude without tearing the system. A scaled decision then increases scope, investment, or time binding slightly while keeping nearby checkpoints, so learning remains fast, reversible, and kind to the people and contexts involved. When to pause? When the pattern turns ambiguous, when contradictory signals appear, when the body contracts even before good arguments, when signal gain seems to depend on forcing people or deadlines. Pausing is not quitting, it is deliberate decoherence. Lowering ambient noise, so a superposition of possibilities does not collapse into habit by impulse. In practice, pausing means shrinking the scale, sleeping on it, retuning the body, reframing the question, and running a new microtest. Intelligent pauses protect relationships, preserve resources, and return clean contours to what momentarily became too cloudy to deserve scaling. When to close? When there is persistent dissonance between values and means. When psychic and relational costs outweigh any gains week after week. When the journal shows effort without practical coherence. When the reading loses strength in the company of lucid others. When action demands self-deceiving narratives to continue. Closing is an act of freedom, declaring experiment concluded with gratitude, harvesting what was learned, and refusing sunk cost drift. In a thermodynamic image, closure lets the system dissipate accumulated heat, creating space for new configurations of meaning to emerge with lightness and dignity. Scaling with sobriety also means integrating risk and interdependence. Every decision touches networks, people, time, reputation, resources. Think of your path as a portfolio, a stable core of grounding practices, plus a few exploratory bets that are small and reversible, where error teaches without breaking anything. Examine second-order effects. What shifts in the environment if you advance? Which alternative routes close? Which new noises might arise? Ethics remains the finest detector. If expansion demands sacrificing care for people and context, the price is too high. If instead it broadens clarity and service, the step is likely to be fertile. A 7-day practice. Before each meaningful decision, write a one-line scaling rule. The condition that, if observed, authorizes one more level of commitment. Define the matching pause rule and the matching closure rule. Execute the minimal action, schedule a 48-hour checkpoint, and log in your journal signal meaning step, clarity level, energetic cost, and perceived impact on the environment. If the advance rule is met with calm expansion and objective data, scale by a centimeter. If not, pause and redesign. If the closure rule lights up, end with dignity. In the next block, we'll integrate everything into a continuous cycle of mastery. Review, teach what you've learned, and keep the field tuned, without losing tenderness. Continuous cycle of mastery. Review, teach, and keep the field tuned. Mastery here is not a medal, it is a cycle. After prototypes, pauses, and scaling, the quiet work begins, keeping the thread of meaning alive, day after day. The master is the apprentice who never tires of measuring with tenderness, observing, asking better, acting small, reviewing, beginning again. Synchronicity stops being a rare event and becomes an operational climate, a stable way of inhabiting the world in which intention, alignment, and action stay in conversation. As in a dynamical system, the cycle feeds itself. Each step produces information. Information refines the setup opens new possibilities, and the entropy of daily life drops a little, returning sharpness to the path. Institute a weekly review ritual that marries poetry and method. Reread your journal as one contemplates constellations. Look for stable patterns, repetitions that keep generating practical coherence, silences that inform limits, and decisions that spare psychic energy. Watch the body while you read. Calm expansion is a finer detector than any spreadsheet. Ask yourself, which question brought me more life? Where did I force signs to fit my narrative? What small adjustment improves next week's experiment? At the end, rewrite your mother intention in one precise, ethical line, then let the rest align around it. But teaching what you learned crystallizes knowledge. Sharing your process with consent and care, not as a formula but as a method, acts as intersubjective measurement. When you speak out loud, signal meaning step, you reduce interpretive noise and strengthen the signal that actually produces results. Invite someone lucid to listen and offer honest questions, not applause. The aim is not spiritual proselytizing, but loving rigor, placing the learning in phase with another consciousness to see whether it keeps its amplitude. If it wilts, refine without drama. If it gains contour, advance a centimeter and document the new version of your protocol. The keeping the field tuned requires fine hygiene of presence. Small courtesies sustain phase coherence in the human system you are. Longer exhales, precise language that avoids excess, short pauses that let the mind settle, notification-free spaces so the inner observer recovers resolution. This is not rigid control. It is sensitive homeostasis. When the thermal noise of haste rises, reading degrades. When the body finds its axis again and vocabulary is pruned, discrete patterns return to view. In that environment, synchronicities stop being something you chase and become something you host. You create the conditions for meaning to appear. Include in the cycle a measure of humility before error and nothingness. Days of null result are not failure, they are data. Record refuted hypotheses, costs avoided, relationships preserved by a timely no. Write small belief updates. What became less probable? What gained strength? Which bias you identified in yourself? Remember the image of decoherence. If we do not institute conditions, automatic habits collapse promising possibilities. If we do, the system tolerates experiments without breaking. Mastery is not infallibility. It is the capacity to learn quickly, with tenderness and precision, handing the wheel back to presence whenever fantasy tries to hijack the narrative. A proposal for the next 7 days. In the morning, 1 minute of written intention. At midday, a short checkpoint to adjust body, language, and focus. At night, 3 journal lines with signal meaning step and a gesture of gratitude for what became legible. Once a week, teach 1 insight to someone who consents to listen. Turn it into a shared practice for 72 hours and observe the social field respond. If you feel calm expansion and gain of signal, scale a centimeter. If you feel contraction, pause without guilt. In the next block, we close by weaving ethics, precision, and beauty, the serene commitment to keep tuning the field while life, with its discrete intelligence, continues to teach us at every step. Closing. Ethics, precision, and beauty in an experiment called life. We end this journey remembering that the science of synchronicity is not spectacle. It is lived method. You learn to calibrate the observer you are, body, language, and emotion, and to craft intentions that lower the entropy of attention. You learn to harvest information where there was once noise, to translate symbols into signal meaning step, to test hypotheses with 72-hour prototypes, to scale with sobriety, and to close paths with dignity. Metaphysics sustained the question of meaning. Quantum mechanics offered images of limits and possibilities without magical promises. Between the two, a ground appeared. Presence that measures, acts small, reviews, and begins again with tenderness and rigor. If anything remains as a compass, it is epistemic humility. Complementarity reminds us there is no single gaze. Spreadsheet and symbol illuminate different slices of the same scene. Denying one impoverishes the other. The observer here does not conjure objects by desire. The observer configures conditions of legibility. Information is the honest reduction of uncertainty, not a slogan. Entanglement, taken as metaphor, recalls interdependence. Every gesture resounds through the web of relations. And decoherence, in human language, warns that haste and scatter make promising superpositions collapse into automatic habit. Ethics, therefore, is not decoration, It is the mechanism that keeps enchantment from sliding into delusion. The practical commitment fits into ordinary days. Mornings with a one-line intention, midday with a brief check-in to realign body and language, evenings with 3 lines in the journal and a gesture of gratitude for what became legible. This rhythm does not control reality. It institutes conditions for meaning to appear. When noise rises, remember to exhale longer than you inhale and to remake the question with useful beauty. When the reading clouds, reduce the scale. When the body contracts, return to your axis before deciding. Keep the field tuned like a chamber instrument. Small, continuous adjustment before each piece, not a miraculous, final tuning. There will be days of informational silence, and that too is data. On such days, pausing is intelligence. Perhaps the question needs a new contour, the prototype another variable, or the time simply is not now. There will be days of honest error. Treat them as a studio, not a tribunal. Update beliefs. Protect yourself from sunk cost drift. Give thanks for what you learned and pivot a centimeter. And there will also be those rare days when everything aligns. Timely encounters, serene clarity, constructive interference between intentions and contexts. On those days, move forward without euphoria and with responsibility, remembering the same criterion: practical coherence that saves psychic energy and honors people. If this work touched you, let it overflow ethically. Share the method, not superstition. Offer a presence that lowers noise, not formulas that inflate promises. In relationships, propose clean agreements. In decisions, prefer reversible micro-actions. In conflict, rest a moment so language can recover precision. The best vibration is coherence between inside and out. When what you think, feel, and do point in the same direction, life answers with legibility, and synchronicities cease to be a chase and become a hospitality of meaning. I leave you with an image, you beneath a night sky, not hunting for compulsory constellations, but allowing points of light to form true drawings for this chapter of your biography. Each night, with each honest question, a new constellation may appear. Not by magic, but because your gaze has learned to read. May your intention remain precise, your alignment sustain tenderness and firmness, and your actions stay minimal and brave. Thus, the science of synchronicity continues, quiet and luminous, in the cadence of your steps, a tuned field that turns presence into path, and decision into music you can hear from within. And so, see you in the next video, with more information on everything that involves growing, evolving, transforming, and manifesting. See you soon.